All right. Well, it is 2 o'clock now. Katie, do you want to get started? Oh, you're muted.
Muted. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. My name is Katie Castagna. I'm the president and CEO for United Way Monterey County. And I'm really thrilled to be part of this very exciting program that is coming to help our county address some of the economic impacts of COVID-19. So we have some information for you related to the SB91 Emergency Rental Assistance Program that was officially launched here in Monterey County this week. And this particular group, we've wanted to outreach specifically to property owners and managers and folks on that side of the equation to make sure you have the direct information that can be of assistance both for you in reclaiming some rent in arrears, and then also for you to be able to facilitate your tenants being able to get caught up. So with me today is Kelly DeWolf, who is our impact manager for affordable housing. And we have set up a really exciting program and look forward to, in the next 45 minutes or so, taking you through the nuts and bolts of it so that you fully understand what it is and how you can access it and benefit yourself and your tenants. For starters, we're going to do a couple things. We don't have time to do a lot of introductions, but I would welcome you to introduce yourself in the chat for one. So please go ahead and announce yourself so we can know who's in the room. And then actually to get acquainted, also to have a more global sense, we have a couple of polls we'd like to do just to kind of get a visual on who is here. So Kelly is going to launch the first one, which is really just asking what what stakeholder group you see yourself in, so we could get a sense of who we have with us today. I also see there's probably a lot of none of the above. I've noticed some of our United Way staff here. We probably have other community partners. So we're just so thrilled to have another chance to share out this information. So if you take a moment and click a box, then we'll be able to share out the results right away.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll here.
Okay. And the survey says we have a lot of property managers here, some with 1 or 2 units, rental with many tenants, several properties. So we have quite a mix. Excellent. Well, thank you. And Kelly, I think we can wait on the other, did you want to do the next one now? Or we can wait a minute.
We can wait. That's fine.
So just to recap why we're here, as many of you know, the state has invested, as well as the federal government, in assistance for renters, specifically who have been affected by COVID-19 and who have rent in arrears, as well as utility assistance. So this really outlines the 2 pots of money that were made available specifically to Monterey County. So SB91 funds, over $15 million, and then the U.S. Treasury Emergency Rental Assistance Program, nearly $13 million that was approved as part of the assistance late in December. So the choices in administering these funds, which came through our county government, the County Board of Supervisors very much wanted to have a local administration and more local control over how we were administering these funds. and they had a decision to make versus between a locally driven program or allowing the state to operate the program. And so one of the things I wanted to just point out to everybody, because it's confusing, is that there is a simultaneous statewide program called Housing is Key that launched on March 15th. So that program is for jurisdictions that have not chosen to go local. So what you'll find is that tenants in Monterey County will all be directed to our program that's coordinated by United Way. If you have tenants in other counties, I know that Santa Cruz County, for example, is going with the statewide program. And so it's really an either or. Both are ways for tenants to receive assistance. But here in Monterey County, what the Board of Supervisors wanted to do was build on a pilot that we did actually in the fall with CARES Act funding. And so we'll be talking to you about what this model is, but we have a good track record of being able to coordinate assistance and really scaling up that assistance. It's not through one agency or one office. It's really working with a collection of partners to make sure we're distributing the funds far and wide. So that's just a little bit about how it's structured here in Monterey County. And Kelly, I think you can go to the next slide. With the goal is to distribute rent and utility assistance to eligible low-income Monterey County residents facing housing instability due to a loss or reduction of income as a result of COVID-19. So again, this was paired with the eviction moratorium that was set in place statewide and supporting really the residents who may have accrued rent in arrears and trying to prevent homelessness at the end of that moratorium. So what I know none of us want to see a huge wave of evictions and homelessness. So that's really the end goal here, is to prevent that. And so the strategies that we're using to do that with this program here in Monterey County is we are, as I said, partnering with other nonprofit and public entity organizations to distribute the assistance countywide. We're using our 211 information and referral program to help do the intake and screening for residents. And again, that is the model that we developed in the fall, where somebody could call 211 24 hours a day and get information about the program and actually screen and enroll in the program. And then that creates a referral to one of our partners who is doing the distribution of the assistance. We now have added a new element, which is an online application. And so that is another way people can access information and actually self-enroll. And they, again, through the online application, will be referred. And we're doing more coordination with the software platform that we've built to do a lot of our other human service delivery locally, and to ensure that we're creating a closed loop referral system where we're not only telling somebody where to go, but we're actually making sure they're enrolled in that particular help. It does allow us to monitor real time. So if we see there's more assistance needed in one place than another, we can shift resources and make sure that we're filling gaps. Okay, Kelly. With the current program, I'm going to turn it over to Kelly to talk to you about the nuts and bolts of eligibility and how people apply and what the criteria are and the expectations. And so Kelly, take it away.
Thank you, Katie, for that overview of the program. I'm going to kind of get into the details here. So in terms of who's eligible for this program, I know there's been a lot of confusion around this particular question, so I just wanted to clarify that a little bit. So the first thing is the COVID impact. This program is only for clients who have been financially impacted by COVID-19. What that means generally is for people who have lost employment or have lost hours or income, but also people who have incurred costs due to COVID-19 pandemic. And that is defined by the Treasury as a pretty broad definition. So that could really mean anything from losing employment or income to maybe having to stop working because you didn't have sick days and you did get the virus, or potentially not having access to childcare and having to stay home, or even things such as having to purchase equipment to be able to work from home. So a really broad kind of definition of COVID-19 impact applies here. And we really want to make sure that's clear in terms of eligibility. So obviously the other big eligibility requirement is income. So tenants do have to fall below 80% AMI, which is defined by HUD. And you can see that here. We also are going to be prioritizing families facing unemployment or homelessness and who are below 50% AMI. So you can see that range on this chart here as well. And obviously we're only serving tenants with this program who reside in Monterey County. So this is kind of our overview of the program and just showing kind of how the process works. So the residents have 3 different ways to access an agency to help them with their application and to apply for assistance. So the 2 primary means of accessing the program, as we said before, is through 211 and through our online application, which is at mcrenthelp.com, or in Spanish, mcayudaderenta.com. When residents fill out an application with a call center specialist or on our online application, they are then referred to one of our participating agencies through our smart referral software. The other way that they can access is if they do have an existing relationship with an agency, or if they have an existing relationship with one of our smart referral agencies. They've all been trained on how to intake clients, and many of them will be participating in that process. So they can actually do their intake instead of with a call center specialist directly with the agency that's participating. So we have several agencies, even those who are not distributing assistance, who have been trained in that as well. So that's another kind of avenue that residents can take to enter the program. So once the referral has been made to one of our participating agencies, the agency then takes on the role of verifying the documentation, collecting documentation from the client and from the property owner or landlord, and then paying the either utility company or landlord or both directly for assistance once they deem that the resident is eligible for assistance and has provided all their documentation. At this point, as it mentions here, we do ask that landlords take 80% of the total amount owed, and that's mandated by the state. So that means forgiving the additional 20%. And this is only for past due rent that this applies. So in terms of required documents that the applicants have to produce in order to be able to receive assistance, they do have to produce a government photo ID. It does not have to be a US ID, but it does have to be a photo ID. They have to provide proof that they've been impacted financially by COVID. And there's many ways to do that, from unemployment letters, pay stubs showing reduction of income, to, to proof of financial costs incurred during the pandemic. And then proof of income, which can also be filling out a self-certification income form with the agency. And then we also ask that any tenants that are past due on their rent receive a signature on a form which is the landlord consenting to accept 80% of the rent that's owed and forgive the additional 20%. And then the agency will verify that that landlord is in fact the property owner through the assessor's office. And then we want to verify the monthly payment amount that the tenant owes to the property owner or landlord through a lease or a signed letter from the landlord. And then finally, the landlord's address for payment and W-9 tax info. And the reason for the W-9 tax info is because the agency does have to report to the IRS and send 1099s for any payments that are made to another company. So we do require a W-9 tax info from the landlord. So in terms of limitations of the program, like how much can the tenant benefit from, and what are the limitations? In terms of past due rent, the client can receive a maximum of 12 months of past due rent. And of course, that's paid at 80%. And that covers rental arrears going back to March 18th of 2020 when the pandemic shelter in place began until March of this year. And then eligible utilities include water, sewer, trash, electric, and gas. And those can be a part of the rental payment or they can be separate as a utility bill. We can provide up to 3 months of assistance for future rent payments at 25%. So we can pay 25% of those future payments, to clarify. And the client does not have to have past due rent to qualify for that. They just have to qualify in terms of their income and in terms of their impact by COVID. They don't have to be past due. So as I said before, landlords have to accept 80% of rent and forgive the remaining 20%. If the landlord does not want to do that or does not want to sign the form that they would be willing to forgive the 20%, then we can still pay either the tenant or the landlord if they provide the necessary information at 25% only. And the 25% figure, just for those who aren't aware, is just to prevent eviction for the clients. Under the current law, as long as the client's paying at 25%, they can't be evicted. So the program began officially, we soft launched last week, but it began officially on March 23rd, and it goes until the end of December, and that's our spending deadline for this funding. So I just want to see and get kind of an idea of how folks are feeling about accepting 80% of rent and forgiving 20%. So I'm just going to do a little poll here. And I also want to get an idea of, on average, how much you're seeing that people are owing in back rent, just so we can get some kind of idea of what the landscape looks like. So I'm just going to launch a few polls right now. So the first one is, how much on average do your past due tenants owe, if you have them?
And meanwhile, I see questions coming in the chat, and thank you so much for that and the Q&A, and we'll make sure we get to as many of those questions as we can.
We'll address as many questions as we can. Okay.
Another thing I just wanted to mention as a caveat is that this program has developed and launched quite quickly, and the state itself is still providing some fine-tuning and guidance. So there will probably be, evolving information that we're looking forward to keeping you in the loop on.
Absolutely. So here's the results here. It looks like 70% of respondents said that their tenants owe more than $5,000. So you could definitely benefit from this program, and that's really good to see. And here's the question about the 80%. just, are you willing to accept 80% of past due rent and forgive the additional 20%? And if so, in what cases? All right. And it looks like the majority, 83% say yes, and 13% say yes for most. And we had one person saying maybe, which is understandable. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Very positive.
Yeah, it's great to see that. And then the final question is, how many months on average do your tenants who are past due owe? And this is kind of just to give us an idea of how far behind the clients on average are. All right, 8 months or more is,
wow.
It looks like half the folks who answered said 8 months or more. That's very, very interesting. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so next slide. So I did want to talk a little bit about how we're dealing with potential fraud or prevention of fraud. We do have a fraud prevention and recapture policy for this program. We have certain software tools that are built into our screening tool and software tool to prevent duplication. So the first thing is that whenever a client starts an intake, they're given a unique identifier based on their name and birthday. So when a call specialist is screening a client, if that client is already in the database, the software will let them know. And that will prevent duplicate files from being created. In addition to that, the software will also let the screener know if the client has already applied for assistance and been deemed eligible for this program. I should also mention that clients who have applied for assistance through our program last year are still eligible for assistance, and the software is aware of that as well. So it's only going to prevent clients who have applied already for this program to not be screened a second time. So again, we have several agencies that are participating in this program. So if a client were to go to 211 and get referred to Salvation Army, for example, they would not then be able to go to Goodwill and be taken in again and reapply, because all of our agencies are using the same software. So that is one way to prevent duplication. And then in addition to that, we're also going to be closely monitoring the program, and we do have a recapture policy in the case we discover that there is potentially a payment that's made fraudulently. So if that has been established, then the agency will request funds to be returned from the landlord, tenant, or utility company. And then, of course, request that checks are stopped if they have not been paid. And if those checks have been paid, then going through a bank affidavit process and potentially legal process. The other thing that we do, which I alluded to before, is verifying that landlords actually own the property. So we do know that oftentimes there's subleasing situations, and so to prevent any confusion there, the agency will call the assessor's office to check that the landlord information provided by the client is correct, and that is in fact the owner of the property, and that the correct person is going to be getting paid. So these are our participating partners. I mentioned Goodwill Central Coast and Salvation Army. We also have Central Coast Energy Services, and all three of those nonprofit agencies are serving the entire county. So they can serve clients remotely or in person. We also have a few community colleges, foundations that are participating. So we have Monterey Peninsula College Foundation, which is providing assistance to only their students, and Hartnell College Foundation, who is providing assistance to students of Hartnell College, faculty, and some family members of students and faculty as well. And then we have the North Monterey County Parks and Recreation District, who is serving our North County residents, and they are working in partnership with the Castroville Coalition and the Castro Plaza Family Resource Center to reach more folks in that area. And then for our jurisdictions, we are working with several jurisdictions on this program. We have City of Monterey and Seaside on the peninsula, Salinas, and then in South County, we have Gonzales, Soledad, Greenfield, and King City, who are also participating in the program. So clients can go directly to the town office and apply, or they can apply through 211 or online and be referred to those jurisdictions as well.
Kelly, I'm going to jump in here because this is, I think, related to one of the questions I see in the chat, and that has to do with for property managers who have large numbers of apartment units. Can they be paired directly with one of the agencies to try and funnel their eligible tenants? And as you now see, it's, we have a sort of a geographical distribution. So the example I see for, and I've heard this from others in Marina, it looks like Preston Park and Abrams, large number of units, they want to make sure they have a partner. So one of our countywide partners would probably be serving that entity. So I'm just wondering, can we, for example, have a more of a group matchup in those cases?
Yeah, so in the case of a property owner that has a lot of clients, what I would encourage you to do is provide your tenants with information. The way that the process kind of works is when a client is doing their intake process, they're allowed to choose which agency they work with. So if there is a partner agency that serves your area, your geographical area, as Katie was mentioning, you can encourage your tenants to apply with that agency. And that would kind of simplify the process, because if you do provide the information that's needed to that agency, they would then have that information on file for your business and be able to process subsequent applications of folks that live at that address more easily. So I would definitely recommend doing that, and I think that's definitely something that can happen. And I think I want to let's see, check the chat because I thought I saw something here.
There's another question about professional management companies versus the owners, like which landlord information is required, and how do we clarify that?
Right. So it really depends on who normally is the one receiving the funds. So what we normally ask the clients for is the name and information for who they're normally paying for their rent. But there are situations where, you might be paying the property manager, for example, but the actual owner of the property might be different. And in that case, we would just need to understand who the payment is going to and who is the actual owner of the property so that we can verify that information. But as long as that's all clear on the lease and it's clear with the tenant, we have ways of documenting that information. The agency can put all that information down on the client's paperwork, and we would just need the information for who would be receiving the check. Okay. So in terms of next steps, I just wanted to give a few recommendations here. We, after this webinar, can send out to all of you our flyers so that your tenants can learn more about the program and see where to apply. We encourage you to share those flyers with your tenants and also refer your tenants to our online application or to 211 to apply for assistance. And these are our websites here that I mentioned before. We also, and just to also kind of further clarify on the last question, it's really important that the tenants are clear on the correct information and being provided with a contact who can be someone that they can interface with, or the agency can interface with to go through this process. So definitely providing them with the correct contact information to obtain those required documents and signatures. And then providing tenants with any required documents that you can, such as signature on the landlord letter and or the consent form if necessary, and information in W-9 tax info. And I think we have questions now, so let me just see what we have here.
There's some great questions in the chat. Do you want me to surface some of those, or in the Q&A, Kelly?
Yeah, I have the Q&A up now, so
okay.
I'll just go ahead and start answering them. The first
Good.
question from John, thank you, John, is for payments of 25% of future payments, does the landlord still have to accept only 80%, or can they get 100%? So the question's worded in a way that's a little bit confusing for me, but I think what you're asking is, would you get 100% of the 25? So the landlord would get 25% of the full amount that's due for that future month.
Well, I think I see the question being, do they have to forgive 20%, or can they still expect full rent in the future payment?
Oh, I see. No, so you don't have to forgive 20% in order to qualify for that 25% of future payment. Let's see here. The next question is, if a renter is not submitting an application, can the landlord submit an application? This is a great question. Right now, the way our system is set up, no, a landlord cannot submit an application because, again, the eligibility requirements for this program, the tenant has to provide documentation to prove their eligibility. So this would have to be the tenant that applies. This next question is about late fees and penalties. This is really important. Most leases include agreements regarding late fees and penalties on rent due. Depending on the agreement, these fees can be thousands of dollars. In agreeing to participate in the program, does the landlord also agree to forego those fees and penalties? So the answer to this is a little bit complicated. The landlord, so one option is that in some cases, I know fees and penalties can be covered by the agency, as long as that is for a past due rent, obviously. But what we also ask is that in accepting the 80% of the total, it's really 80% of everything that's due, and that would include fees. But also that the landlord does not then charge additional late fees on that extra 20% that's remaining. That's part of the agreement. So I hope that makes sense. But so yes and no, I would say 20% of the fees, yes, but not the entirety of the fees. Okay, the next question, I want to go back to the 25% of future rent. We have a question that's, since only 25% of future rent can be paid, is the resident fully responsible for the remaining 75%, or is there a portion of that future rent that landlords also have to forgive? This is kind of piggybacking on a question we had before, but yeah, the resident would be responsible for the remaining 75%. They would not have to forgive that 75%, but the 25% is just intended to prevent the client from eviction going forward. We have a question. Let me see here. Okay, I have rented a home to a family that works in agriculture. The person who signed the lease has returned to Columbia to assist his family there. His sister and her husband have continued to live in the house. Can they apply for assistance even though they did not sign the lease but were listed as occupants? Yes. They do not have to be on a lease to qualify for assistance as long as they can provide proof of their monthly rent amount and prove their income, eligibility, and COVID impact. They are still eligible for the program.
And Kelly, so proof in this example, so proof that they are that they have a relationship, can that be a letter from the landlord or?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for that, Katie. So if there is no lease, so clients who don't have a lease at all can still qualify, as long as they provide a letter signed by the property owner. It could either be the property manager or the landlord saying that the rental relationship exists and attesting to the amount that is due per month and the total amount that's due.
And Kelly, don't we have a template for that we could provide it?
Yeah. So we provide that to all of our agencies, and so they can provide that to your tenant who applies, and the tenant can bring it to you for signature. Okay. Lots more questions here. Can the property management company sign on behalf of the owner? I would say yes. I think it should just be let the agency know that you are the property management company, and let them know the information of the owner so that they can verify that. But yes. And that also answers another question here. Is there any idea about how long the approval process will take, and if approved, how long before landlords will receive relief? Great question. We have a huge demand right now for this program. We've received already hundreds of applications. We only launched officially a few days ago. So it could definitely take a few weeks for your application to be processed, but I would say like once the agency has received all documentation, the turnaround time for receiving payment shouldn't be more than a week or so. That's generally what we saw last year with our program. What happens when or if a tenant is provided with all information regarding this program but does not submit an application? I mean, yeah, ultimately the tenant does have to apply for this program. Obviously, you can encourage the tenant to apply, but they do have to provide that proof of eligibility, and if they don't do that, they cannot be eligible for the program.
I see a comment about a website glitch. As Kelly said, we just launched the online application this week, and we know there were a couple glitches, so we apologize for that. And there have been a lot of fixes in the works, so we know we have had lots of people successfully complete the online application. So I guess my request would be either email us for a specific fix that is still a problem, or try again, because there have been a lot of fixes that have happened in the last couple of days.
Okay. What is the due date for the application? So it's ongoing. The applications, we're going to be accepting applications all the way till December. So there is no due date. It's a rolling, but we do have the spending deadline of the end of the year. So December 31st is the last day that we can actually spend this funding. Does the W-9 tax info have to be provided to the local agency or to the tenant to give to the agency? It's your preference. It can be provided directly to the local agency if you're more comfortable that way, because I know that W-9 tax info has some personal information. You're welcome to provide it to the agent that's working with your client, or you can give it to the tenant to provide themselves.
So I'm seeing, though, and this is new to me, there's some sensitivity around that information. So I guess the ability to provide that directly to the agency is an important caveat. Kelly, the agency holds that in confidence, right?
Yes, yeah. All of the information provided on these is completely confidential, and we have our system we is completely encrypted. So all of that personal information is very well protected. If a tenant has remained current, can they apply for the future 3 months? Yes, they can, as long as they are eligible for the program in terms of their income level, and as long as they have been financially impacted by COVID-19, they can apply for those future months. So one note about that, though, if they are applying right now, for example, for April rent, they would only be able to receive 25% of April's rent right now, and then they would have to come back and not reapply, not go through the whole same process, but they would have to reprove their income eligibility in 1 month to apply for May rent. Let's see. Are all occupants on the lease required to apply, or just one member of the household? This is a good question because it can get complicated with people renting rooms. So essentially the way that we process applications is by tax household, so families. So if 2 families, for example, are sharing space, those 2 families can both apply for assistance, but another member of the household, I should say, like in terms of household, in terms of filing taxes, would not be able to apply for assistance. So for example, a husband and wife, only one of them could apply for assistance. But if that husband and wife's living at the same address, like in a house, for example, with another couple, the other couple could also apply for assistance. So on their application, the client is required to share the income of everyone in their tax household, just so that we can verify who those folks are and who's applying for assistance. Can you provide the website address for the Spanish application? I'm going to type that in. It's mcayudaderenta.com. I'm putting that in the Q&A in the answered questions. I'll also put it in the chat when I get a chance. Let me see. Okay, so there's another question about unauthorized occupants. Will that impact the rental assistance help? If you have an unauthorized occupant, it might be difficult for them to obtain proof of a rental relationship. So that's part of our application process, because we want to make sure that there aren't any situations where people are unauthorized. I don't know. Do you have anything to add to that, Katie?
I guess by unauthorized, you're saying if somebody subleases. I'm not even clear on an example of that, but I guess it does track back to having some way of proving a rental or lease relationship.
Right. There's another question from, it looks like a tenant. What if the roommates have moved out without giving notice and I am still in the home? My lease has others that are no longer living with me. Can I still apply? Yeah, if you're on the lease, or as long as you're an authorized renter of that space, you can definitely still apply, as long as you can provide that there is a rental relationship between you and that landlord or property management company. You can still qualify for assistance as long as you're eligible in all the other ways. If the tenant is approved for 80% assistance through this program, can the tenant voluntarily pay the remaining 20% even though it was forgiven? No. So the state legislation states that that 20% has to be forgiven, which means that essentially the client, it can't be, fundraised, it can't be provided by the client, it can't be provided by, another funding source. It really has to be forgiven.
And I see a really good question from a lot of good questions from Dave Taggart, but around the sequence of events, maybe we can walk through that,
Yeah.
as far as the application timing and when the landlord gets involved.
Yeah, sure. So the tenant submits an application, but when does the landlord supply the necessary agreements? Good question. So that when the tenant submits their application, essentially they're submitting their personal information, their, I guess, delinquency information, so how much they owe, and the information about their utility companies and their landlord's contact information, if they have it. And at that point, they get referred to an agency, and they are expected to reach out to the agency to follow up on their application. The agency will reach out to them if they don't receive a follow-up from the client, but it's we kind of tell both to contact each other. And at that point, which is usually, it can be anywhere from a few days to a week until they get in contact with the agency. At that point, the agency will ask for their documentation. So that's the point when the tenant's going to be given that form for you as property managers or as landlords to sign, and when they're going to ask for that W-9 form. So after they receive all that documentation, that's when the payment can be issued.
And I would just ask for, a little bit of patience on the startup of this, because we're working with, we have a great group of partners, but they're going to have varying timelines and ability to really get things flowing. So we've been pushing hard to have everybody ready. And I talked to one of the cities this morning, and they're already paying utility bills for folks. So the money's flowing, but just know, and as reflected in the call volume for 211, and still working out a couple bugs in our online application. Just, thank you for any patience and grace you can share with us. But encourage your tenants to, be patient and continue to try, and know that this is such a significant resource. We're not going to run out this month. There's definitely going to be time for people. And so that's another way you can help, is actually, giving people a little bit of leeway or time, and knowing that this money will flow to eligible residents, but it's not going to flow today, but soon.
Great. And I see a couple questions in chat here. Can we obtain the flyer for tenants from our website? We will email out both the slides from this presentation and also the flyers that you can share with your tenants. The other question is, the tenant's not going to have access to the landlord's information in the case of professionally managed properties. How will this be handled? In this case, the agency would reach out to the property manager and obtain the required information directly. And then we do have another one. How does the contact between your partners and landlords work? Text, mail, phone, email. Generally, I think phone is the first method, but email is totally workable as well. I'm sure if they're not able to reach anyone by phone and email, the agency is required to attempt by mail as well.
But what's important there, especially during COVID, is it doesn't, people don't necessarily physically have to go to an office.
Absolutely
Is
not.
that right?
Yeah. You can fax the information, email it, text it to the landlord, or sorry, to the agency. That's completely fine. Someone's asking about the landlord consent form. I can actually show that right now.
And perhaps we can send a copy of that out, just
Yeah.
so you have it on your end. That could be part of our follow-up email.
Yes. So this is what it looks like. So the first thing is the cover letter that kind of explains the program. And in this cover letter, the agency is supposed to fill out the name of the tenant who's applying, their address, and the name of the agency, just so you have that information. At this point, there's a form here that you have to sign. So it's certifying that the tenant, which is tenant's name, goes here, address goes here, the amount of months they owe, and then you can list the names of the months here, the dates of the months, I should say, how much per month is owed, and the total amount. So then there's an attestation, agree to accept 8% of the total amount owed and forgive the remaining 20% as acceptable for the above tenant to remain housed, and agree not to evict, penalize, or charge any fees to the tenant as a result. And also agreeing to allow the above tenant to remain in the rental unit for a minimum of 30 days according to government regulations. Signature here from the tenant and from the landlord or property manager, as I mentioned before. And then we also have this tracking form. This is for the agencies to use so that they can track the difference between the tenant, property manager, landlord. If there's a sublessor, who's like, for example, I know in some situations a sublessor is permitted to do that, so that could be the case in some situations. And then checking to make sure the assessor's office verified the owner of the property. Okay. And we have more questions here.
Well, I think somebody had already gotten a form brought back. If it looked like that, then it looks like the program's working.
Yes, so if your resident came in and brought you paperwork to sign, that means they were approved for assistance and they're eligible, they've already applied, and they just need that paperwork to continue and finish their application.
And then clarity on the late fees and penalties.
Yeah, so if there are late fees and penalties, those can be included in the total amount according to the state and federal regulations. So yes, those would be included if necessary.
Question about contact information.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question, but if I do understand correctly, the agency, so when the tenant applies for assistance online or with 211, they are provided with the contact information of the agency that they will be working with. And at that point, they can reach out to the agency and provide the agency with their landlord's contact info or the name of their of the company that they rent from. And so the agency can reach out directly to that landlord, or the tenant can bring that paperwork directly to the landlord if that's the case. I'm getting questions about late fees during COVID. I'm not 100% on what the law says, but my understanding is people are still receiving late fees. That's what I've been hearing.
And that's an eligible expense under the SB91?
Yeah, it is.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm going to be the time monitor because I know we have to wrap up in the next couple minutes. I love all these questions, and maybe I see we're down to one open one. Do we have an answer for that, Kelly? And then we can.
I think that's outside of our scope. I mean, you know, that would be a legal
Problem tenant.
question that I don't really know how to answer. But oh, how are discrepancies between the tenant and the landlord resolved? I'm not sure what that means either.
But I do think there's common resources that you're probably familiar with, like Echo Housing, that does
Yeah.
education and you know, some other support for landlord tenant.
Yeah, for that question, I would reach out to Echo Housing. They would be a great resource for that, definitely.
So I'm gonna wrap us up now and be respectful of everybody's time. I just want to thank you all for joining us here and for the excellent questions. We will be sharing out this information with you as far as the PowerPoint slides and the forms we talked about and flyers. And then there's also going to be additional information coming out as far as promotion, some social media posts and other kinds of flyers and materials probably in the next week. So we've got your email addresses and we'll continue to update you as new information comes. We'll post this information on our website, and we'll probably do a couple more of these. If you have colleagues that are interested in attending, please encourage them to contact us, and we're happy to continue the dialogue.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.